Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
So iconic. Okay, Trekkie Dave here. So today I'm going to do episode 27. And the topic that I'm wanting to discuss today is Hammer Studio Films. I don't know if you all will be familiar with it, because it's not actually an American film studio. Hammer is a British film studio. And they were sort of the studio that took over the Universal Monster Pictures, because they had the same content, but they were 30 years later. So Universal monster films, as you know, were from the 1930s. And it was, Frankenstein and Dracula and so forth. And in the 1950s, at the end of the 1950s, I don't know how exactly it worked, but a British studio called Hammer Studios took over those properties. They must have bought it, I'm assuming, from Universal. And they modernized and made modern versions of all those films. So they had their version of Dracula, their version of the werewolf, their version of Frankenstein, and so forth. And they modernized it. So their films, like the 1930 Universal films, were all black and white. The Hammer films were all in color. So because they were color, they sort of exploited that a little bit. So those films had more blood in them, and they were more flamboyant color-wise and stuff. Like when you see their first Dracula film, Dracula's castle is full of like vibrant colors. So they emphasized the new technology, and part of that was color and so forth. And the content itself was more violent. So today I want to actually discuss a specific film, Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures. The film came out in 1962, and it was directed by Peter Graham Scott. And the film's got a great cast, but there's a few ideas that I want to discuss about this film, and why it's my favorite of the Hammer films. And one of the components that makes it my favorite of all the Hammer films is that it has a twist at the very end of the film that goes against a Hammer trope, okay? So for me to discuss this film, I'm going to have to give away a pretty big spoiler about the film's narrative that literally is revealed in the final 10 minutes of the movie. And so I'm trying to think how to do this. Because if you're gonna watch this film, I'm gonna give you the end of the film. So that's gonna be a problem. So I guess what I'll say is I'll do a non-spoiler part right now. And then when I get to the point where I give you the twist, I'll just let you know at that point. If you're not wanting to know the end of the film, then I guess stop watching. Okay, it's the only thing I can think of to avoid spoiling it for you. Because the point of this video is the twist, and if I give you the twist. But one thing about this film, it's very obscure. This is not one of the more popular Hammer films. The more popular ones would be Dracula and Frankenstein and so forth. This is a film that I've had on Blu-ray for a few years, but it was hard to find. And I don't know where you would stream this from, like on American television. The Hammer films were very British, and I'm not even sure if you could find this if you wanted to watch it, to be totally honest. So at the end of the day, it may not really matter beyond me discussing the film, because you probably won't be able to see it. Actually, funny enough, I wanted to look for some inserts to put into this video, and I couldn't find anything online for this film. The only insert I could find was the original trailer from 1962. There's no scenes of this film, This is how obscure this film is.
Darkness. How did he die, man?
Dr. Pepper signed the certificate natural causes, but I should have thought from the look of the poor fellow that he died of fright.
This is a frightened village. Here, it is wiser to close your ear to a scream in the night. In this place, even familiar things take on an odd and terrifying significance.
Okay, so let me begin here. Sorry, I'm just going to grab some water. Just a little perched, and I'm feeling a little off today. So I wrote a bunch of stuff down, and I'm just going to begin there. I'll just give you the premise of what the film is about, and just some observations that I have about it, and why I love it so much. Okay, so first off, this film has an amazing cast for a Hammer film, which they had. Don't get me wrong, they had good casts and they were British casts, but there are some pretty amazing actors in this film. First off, Peter Cushing, who was a great actor from that time, and for those of you who aren't familiar with him, I think if I tell you one role he was in, an American movie, you would know it immediately. So Peter Cushing played Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars. So he's the guy who's in charge of the Death Star. And that was probably his most famous American role. But Peter Cushing plays the vicar. So he plays the religious leader or the church vicar of a small British town, okay? So Peter Cushing is in it. Oliver Reed is in it. And he plays, yes, the famous Oliver Reed, who was a big actor in the 1960s. But he plays a character named Harry. And my favorite character in the film, or my favorite actor in the film, is Patrick Allen. And he plays Royal Navy Captain Collier, okay? So just to give you the premise of the movie. The movie takes place in 18th century England. Specifically, the date of the movie is 1792. And the movie takes place in a small British town, coastal town. I don't think we're ever given the name of the town. But one of the things that I always loved about this film is that it was shot outdoors in a real town. And you can tell, like, the cinematography, there's not a lot of indoor scenes. There's a lot of outdoor scenes, and it's shot with natural lighting, and it's shot in a real location. And it really gives an ambiance and a feel to this. Like, you get to know, through the course of the 2 hours of the film, you get to know this town. And it's really well realized. Like, it's really well done. I love this small British town setting, shot not on sets, but clearly in a real town, natural outdoor coastal setting. This is a beautiful film. And when it does go indoors, it's really interesting because the film is designed in a very interesting way, because there's hidden tunnels that connect the church to the rest of the town. It's very creative. So like when you're within the church, you can open up a hidden door and go from one end of the town to the other, which is a plot point that I'll discuss when I get to the spoilers, okay? But it's very neat that way. So I just put, love the hidden tunnels we see connecting the church to other buildings and escape exits throughout the town. Okay. So the premise of this film is that this town is being plagued by a supernatural creatures called the Marsh Phantoms. And there's a town legend that these Marsh Phantoms have been around for hundreds of years, and that they basically, the town is surrounded by marshes, and these Marsh Phantoms basically are the supernatural beings within the town surroundings, and they basically occasionally, essentially, cause trouble. That's basically it. They cause trouble. So the film begins with the Marsh Phantoms. So they're basically skeletons on horsebacks. So the horses are skeletons, and there's riders on the skeleton or on the horses, and they're also skeletons. And the film begins with them chasing down a man in the marshes, and he falls into the marsh and he dies. Okay? So what ends up happening is the British Navy becomes involved to investigate the killing or investigate the man dying. So that's when Captain Collier and the Royal Navy arrive at the coastal town to begin their investigation. And as the film progresses on, we learn that they're actually there for more than that. They're not just there to investigate this murder and the phantom marshes or the Marsh Phantoms. They've actually arrived at this town because they've been given information that the town is part of a bootlegging syndicate. So the town is accused of basically bootlegging alcohol to France, because directly across the channel from this small town is France. And the Navy is investigating whether there's any truth to this accusation that the town is involved in bootlegging. And here's my kitty cat. Hello, yes, you're starting to become a regular on my videos. So anyways, and this is where I'm going to bring up the spoiler thing, because I have to start discussing spoilers if I'm going to give you the full story of what happens in this. So I'm trying to think of how to do this. So here's the gist of my take on this film. What makes this film work and what makes the twist work is that if you're a fan of Hammer films, then when you watch a Hammer film, like the Universal films before them, the creatures are always real, okay? So Dracula is real in the Hammer films, just like Dracula is real in the Universal films. The werewolf is real. Frankenstein is real. And the way that it works in this film is Hammer uses that trope that we believe automatically that the Phantom Marshes are real, because they're always real, and all the monsters are always real in Hammer films. So they use that trope to give us a twist at the very end of the film that we're not expecting, because it's presented in such a well way with the attack at the beginning and so forth, that the Marsh Phantoms are real. Okay, so anyways, what's really happening here is, how do I describe this? What's really happening here is there's a town, and half of them, so not everybody involved in the town is part of the bootlegging scam, but there's a portion of the town that is. So there's this Captain Clegg. So Captain Clegg was a pirate who everybody believes is dead, that died 25 years before, but he's actually the Peter Cushing character. He's the vicar. So he plays the religious church leader of the town. He's pretending to be a clergyman when he's really not. He's Captain Clegg. And there's about a dozen of his men, his pirate men, and they've been running this bootlegging out of the town for 25 years. So this interesting dichotomy or whatever in the movie is that these 12 people know what's going on and they're involved in the bootlegging scam, but the hundreds of other people in the town know nothing about it. They're not a part of it. They're not part of this bootlegging scam. So they don't know that there's any bootlegging going on. So when the squire, so it's kind of interesting because one of the characters is the magistrate, the chief magistrate, who's the squire. He's essentially like the mayor of the town. He knows nothing about it. So when he's having interactions with the Royal Navy and they're questioning him because they're suspicious of him because they're investigating this bootlegging, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's legitimate. He has no idea that this bootlegging is going on. It's going on under his nose, and he doesn't know about it. And there's a really interesting scene where they're talking about the Marsh Phantoms, and he doesn't believe in them. Anyways, his son, who's played by Oliver Reed, is part of the bootlegging scam. He's one of Peter Cushing's men pulling the scam. So the magistrate knows nothing about it, but his son is heavily involved in it. And there's this really great scene in the film where the Captain Collier and the magistrate and his son are having a conversation, and the magistrate is saying that he doesn't believe in the marshes, the Phantom Marshes, that it's just a town legend, that it's garbage. And the Oliver Reed character, who's his son, says, well, I've seen them. And so there's this really interesting thing going on there where you have different sides playing each other, and obviously the son knows the truth, but the magistrate doesn't really know what's going on. So it's really interesting. And just a couple of other little things here to comment on. Another thing that I really love about this film is the bootleggers use scarecrows to spy on the Royal Navy. So what they do is they place lookouts within a scarecrow. So you have a scarecrow, but there's a person in it watching what they're doing. It's to spy on them while they're moving their goods and stuff so they don't get caught. Those scenes are really well realized. I love it, okay? This film uses the trope and it reveals things slowly. So at the beginning of the film, all we know is about these Phantom Marshes. We don't yet know about the bootlegging stuff. And by the end of the film, it uses that hammer trope that the creatures are real. And then it's revealed literally to us in the final 10 minutes that the creatures aren't real, that this is a giant scam, and that half of this town, or a dozen people, including the vicar, the religious, and the church, is involved in this bootlegging scam. So I just always like that about this film. I think it's really well done, and I like the fact. So I'll just read this to you quickly, something I wrote down just to sort of explain it. I put down the mayor who is not a part of the scam. So most of the town isn't involved in the scam. Interesting dynamic. Scenes of town folk legit not knowing about the bootlegging or that the creatures aren't real. It's a unique Hammer film. Only one I know of where the creatures are not real, not legit. And film plays on that Hammer tradition in order to deliver on the surprise twist at the end of the film that the night creatures are actually the town vicar, Captain Clegg, and his gang, and is part of this bootlegging scam they've been pulling since his perceived death 25 years prior. Okay, so that's the gist of the movie, and it's what I love about this movie. It sort of has, in a funny kind of way, it sort of has a pre-Scooby Doo kind of idea, where you have something like creatures that appear to be real but are revealed at the end of the episode to, you know, not be real. I just love that about it. And that's something else I want to mention quickly. For Christmas, my wife got me the season 1 and 2 of Scooby Doo, Where Are You? And I watched that just recently, a few of those episodes, and that's what got me thinking of doing the idea of this video, because it's funny. It's almost like Scooby Doo, Where Are You? Was sort of inspired by Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures, because it kind of has a similar idea. And I can't find any scenes of Captain Clegg, so maybe I'll stick a scene of Scooby Doo at the end of this, because there was an episode of Scooby Doo, the Spooky Space Kook, where that villain has the craziest laugh I've ever heard. So anyways, that's basically it for this video. If you've never seen a Hammer film, I would recommend seeing Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures. In my opinion, for all the reasons I went over, it's the best Hammer film, and I love it. So hopefully this is something you can check out if you can find it. So that's Trekkie Dave signing off. Next, I'll be coming out with episode 28. God bless y'all. Take care. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you can check out this video, check it out. It's worth it. It's a great film. Okay, thank you.